And as we map out local preventative and response strategies to gender-based violence, what are some of the psychological triggers for violence in families? We're joined now by South African Depression and Anxiety Group Clinical Psychologist Charity Mkone. Charity, good evening and thank you for your time. 2/3 of women at shelters are unemployed at this particular point. We are talking, of course, of the effects of gender-based violence, also on the employability of women. Care to reflect for us?
Thank you very much for having me, Thabo. I think the statistics are quite staggering of the number of women who are victims of domestic violence and domestic abuse. And it is important to bear in mind that these are the women that come forward. These are the women who actually speak up about it, that the numbers might be much higher because a lot of women feel a lot of shame, and they carry a lot of shame in terms of being in abusive relationships or being in homes where domestic violence is perpetrated against them. And I think this makes for a very bleak picture, because what often happens is that these women who are victims of gender-based violence, women who feel very powerless in the face of abusive partners, tend to have mental health issues, particularly things such as depression or anxiety that often goes untreated, and that becomes a hazard for them in terms of their functionality of their everyday lives.
Now, does employment in any way, the employment of a woman, particularly in that kind of relationship, aggravate, or does it alleviate the domestic violence?
I mean, there is no clear correlation, and it is hard to say that one leads to another or one causes the other. But I think a lot of causes of domestic violence are with regards to partners, or particularly male partners who are abusive to their partners. They themselves either struggle with substance abuse disorder or with depression. Usually what we see with depression and how it plays out in men is that they become quite aggressive. And it's very difficult then for the woman, whether or not she's employed, because you would think that the fact that she's employed and can look after herself would be a protective factor in terms of her agency or ability to leave the relationship or to assist herself. But it often is the violence that is perpetrated on her by the man or the person that she's in a relationship with due to the other person's or the perpetrator of the violence own issues. And therefore it makes it very difficult, particularly if the person, after abusing the woman, apologizes. And I think there's been a lot of research that's shown how difficult it is, and that women leaving abusive relationships need a lot of emotional and psychosocial support in order to do so. That it's not as simple as having causality or one thing leading to causing the other.
With a move down to alert level 3, are we likely to see a decrease in stress levels as the economy open up and I suppose people are able to go and earn a livelihood?
I mean, from a psychological perspective, that is unlikely, particularly because of the number of days or the months that we've spent in lockdown. But it's important to register this pandemic, the lockdown and everything that's come with it, as a global traumatic event. And usually what comes after a trauma for most people are post-traumatic stress symptoms, or the things that we feel post or undergoing a trauma. And because a lot of people's lives have changed quite drastically because of the pandemic, a lot of the things that people were used to escaping, places that they could escape to, or things that they could easily escape before the lockdown, were not available to them then. So there's a lot of dynamics and psychological issues that have come up for people, that for most people, particularly for women who live in gender-based violence